The sky over Arizona changed without warning. Bright lines tore through the clouds like burning rivers of silver. A quiet evening on a lonely farm turned into something. Unreal animals ran from their shelters, birds vanished into the trees, and in the middle of a wide, empty field, two alien ships appeared in the air. They didn't land. They crashed, the ground shook, fences broke. Dry red dust flew into the air as metal dug into the earth. People from nearby towns saw it. Some ran toward the crash with phones and flashlights. Others called the police. Within minutes, military vehicles were already on the move. But what came out of the ships was not fire, not soldiers, not machines. It was two girls. Their skin shimmered with a soft blue glow. Their eyes were deep violet. Their hair looked like strands of soft light, moving on its own. They looked young, but they were not human. They stepped out slowly, looked around like they were waking from a long sleep, and then one of them dropped to her knees and pressed her hand to the ground. She whispered something in a language this planet had never heard. Her name was Lyara. The other girl stood beside her, silent and watchful. Her name was Sal. They had not come to Earth by choice. They were not explorers, not invaders. They were prisoners back on their homeworld of Altheria. They had broken the sacred code of obedience. They refused to follow an order that would have led to the death of a helpless child. Their leaders saw it as betrayal. Even mercy was a crime under the rules of the High Council. As punishment, they were stripped of their names in public, branded with exile, and sent across the galaxy to Earth, a place considered too wild, too dangerous, too human. Their orders were clear: survive in silence, hide, do not interfere, do not form emotional bonds, and never ever fall in love with a human. If they did, their punishment would become death. As the military trucks got closer, the girls activated their cloaking devices. Their forms shimmered and vanished. The soldiers saw only broken metal and smoke. No bodies, no signs of life. Liara and Sayla ran into the forest, moving like shadows through the trees. They found a cave near a stream and made it their shelter. For days they did not speak. They only watched the sky, watched the animals, watched the humans from the hills above town. They studied human life through small screens built into their suits. They saw children laughing at schoolyards, old people walking dogs, families having dinner fires in cities, tears at funerals, kisses in the rain. Scylla kept her distance. She reminded Lyara of the rules, of the danger, of the price they would pay if they got too close. But Lyra's heart was changing. One night, they saw a young man driving down a mountain road. A deer jumped in front of him. The car spun out of control. It hit a tree and flipped into a ditch. Smoke poured from the engine. The boy inside, his name was Ethan, was unconscious, bleeding. Zayla said leave him, but Lyara had already moved. She reached the car, pulled the door open with alien strength, lifted Ethan out and carried him up the hill where the air was clean. She touched his face. Her glowing hand slowed his pulse. Her voice calmed his pain. Ethan opened his eyes just for a second, just long enough to see a soft light, a blur of blue, a warmth he could not explain. Then Lyara ran back into the trees, gone before he could remember her face. Ethan was found the next morning by hikers. His injuries were gone, his memory broken. But he never forgot the feeling of that night, the soft light, the touch that saved him, the eyes he almost saw back in the cave. Lyara sat with her head down, her heart beating fast. She knew she had broken the first rule. She had interfered. She had touched a human, and something inside her wanted to do it again. Sella stood at the cave entrance, her arms crossed, her voice colder than before. She asked, "What are you feeling?" Lyra looked up. She said, "I don't know, but it's something real." That night, above the cave, the stars shifted again. A pulse of light passed across the sky back on Altheria. The High Council received a signal. It said emotional imprint detected, punishment phase activated. The morning air in Arizona was quiet again. The crash was now a rumor, a news report lost in the noise of the world. But for Ethan, that night stayed alive in his mind. He stood at the edge of the road where it happened. His hand rested on the tree his car had hit. No bruises, no pain, Not a single scar on his body, but he remembered a soft hand on his chest. A voice he could not place, a warmth that felt too perfect to be real. Everyone told him he imagined it. That shock made the memory up, but Ethan was sure someone had saved him. He started going back to that place every evening, watching the trees, listening to the wind, searching for the light he saw that night. And not far from him, hidden in the shadows of the woods, Liara watched him too. She didn't know why. She told herself it was curiosity, a way to understand the people of this world. But every time she saw Ethan smile, something inside her moved. Selah warned her again. This world is not ours. They are not like us. Feelings are not survival. But Liara didn't answer that night. She sat near the stream, holding a small flower in her hand. Its petals were red and soft. She had seen Ethan stop and admire the same flower days ago. She didn't understand why humans found beauty in simple things. But now she wanted to know. Back in the cave, Selah watched an old human device they had taken from a broken truck. It played music, a slow song, soft and full of sadness. She couldn't understand the words, but the feeling in the voice stayed with her. Long after the song ended in town, Ethan began drawing again. He was an artist before the accident. Now his sketches were full of glowing figures, eyes that watched him from the dark, hands that reached for him and disappeared. One afternoon, he left a small notebook under a tree by the crash site. Inside was a message, just one sentence: "If you saved me, thank you." He returned the next day. The notebook was gone, but in its place was a single red flower. Liara had taken the note. She read it over and over. The words were simple, but they made her chest feel heavy, like something inside her had shifted. She looked up at the sky, and for the first time since Exile, she smiled. Back in town, Ethan dreamed of her again. This time he saw her face. Not clearly, but enough to know she wasn't human. When he woke, he wasn't afraid. The next day, he returned to the forest, not as a searcher, but as someone hoping to be found. Liara stood above him on a ridge, watching again. Heart racing, Selah appeared behind her. She said, "If they find out, you will be erased." Liara said, "Then let them." She stepped forward out of the shadows. Out of the safety of hiding, Ethan turned. He saw her blue skin, glowing eyes, hair that moved like the sky at night. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them held its breath. Ethan didn't move, didn't run. He simply said, "I knew you were real." Liara looked at him. Her voice was soft. "You were not meant to see me, but I'm glad I did." They sat by the stream together. She didn't speak much, only listened as Ethan told her about his life, his art, his questions. She told him her name, only her name. That was enough. As the sun set, she stood up to leave. He asked, "Will I see you again?" Liara didn't answer, but she placed a hand on his shoulder. A small glow passed through her fingers. A quiet goodbye. Back at the cave, Selah was pacing. She had felt the signal pulse again. The warning from their homeworld. They were being watched, but she didn't tell Liara, not yet. Instead, she returned to the edge of town, where a girl sat on a bench every night playing an old instrument, eyes closed, fingers moving gently over the strings. This girl was blind, but her music was clear. Selah stood far away, but the song reached her. Each note felt like light, not the kind from stars, but from something inside. For a moment, Selah didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt human. She returned to the cave, found Liara sketching something in the dirt. A face, Ethan's face. Selah sat beside her, and for the first time in days, she didn't speak with anger. She said, "You're falling for him." Liara didn't deny it. She said, "He makes me feel like I belong." Selah looked at the fire. The orange glow danced across the stone walls. She whispered, "That feeling is the most dangerous thing we can carry outside." Beyond the hills, a signal moved through the sky, invisible to human eyes. It came from orbit, from a small dark ship. A hunter drone sent by the Eltherian Council. It had locked onto their location and transmitted a silent command: "Confirm emotional bond. Prepare for termination." The stars above Arizona looked calm that night, but something cold and dangerous was hiding behind them in the dark of orbit. A small black drone hovered without a sound. Its sensors were locked on the signal of emotional imprint. The data was clear. One of the exiles had formed a connection with a human. The drone received orders: confirm bond. Eliminate subject on the ground. Ethan was walking through the woods again. His backpack held a sketchbook. Inside were dozens of drawings of eyes of stars. Of her, Liara waited for him by the stream. Her boots rested on the rocks. Her long hair shimmered under the sunlight. She had learned to smile now. Not just with her mouth, but with her eyes. When Ethan saw her, he smiled too. He said, "You came back." She said, "I couldn't stay away." They sat together under a tall tree. The air smelled like pine and dustbirds sang nearby. But to Ethan, it was like the world had gone quiet. He opened the sketchbook, showed her the drawings. "This is how I see you," he said. Liara looked at the images. Her fingers brushed over the paper. Each stroke held a piece of him, his heart, his thoughts. She whispered, "No one has ever seen me this way before." They didn't speak for a while. The silence between them felt warm. Then Liara asked, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" Ethan looked into her eyes. "Because you saved me. And because fear is the last thing I feel when I'm with you." She looked away. A part of her wanted to cry. But she had never cried before, not even on the day of exile. Eltherian taught control silence duty, above emotion. But now everything was changing. Not far from them, high in the sky, the drone moved into position. Invisible to all human machines, its weapon systems were warming. Back at the cave, Sayla felt a strange pulse of vibration in her bones. She stepped outside, looked at the sky. She knew something had come, but she also knew she was not ready to lose her sister. Down the hill, the blind girl played music again. Her name was Mara. Her song echoed through the trees, light and soft, like a message only the heart could hear. Sayla stood behind a tree, watching her, listening. She didn't understand the words, but she felt them. Mara stopped playing and turned her head toward the woods. She said, "I know you're there." Sayla didn't answer. Mara smiled. "You don't have to be afraid. I won't tell anyone." Sayla stepped into the light. Her glowing skin caught the sun. Her eyes were wide. Mara gasped softly, but she didn't run. She simply said, "You're not from here, are you?" Sayla nodded once. Mara tilted her head. "You feel alone, but I think you're not." Sayla looked away. Her voice was quiet. "Why are you not afraid?" Mara smiled again. "Because I hear your heart in the way you walk. It's not the sound of danger, it's the sound of someone trying to belong for the first time." Sayla felt something she couldn't name. Not trust, not love, but a beginning in the forest. Ethan and Liara stood near the river, their hands almost touching. Ethan asked, "What happens if someone finds out about us?" Liara said, "If find out, they'll send something worse than exile." She looked up at the sky, eyes full of fear. Suddenly, the drone fired a low pulse. Not to kill, but to test. Liara dropped to one knee, grabbing her chest. Her skin flickered. Ethan caught her before she fell. "What's happening?" he asked. She looked at him, her voice weak. "They found Masala." Felt the shock from miles away. She ran toward the forest, her heart pounding. Mara called after her, but Sayla was already gone. Ethan carried Liara to a rock. She was shaking. Her glow was fading. Then a beam of light hit the trees. The drone appeared, floating just above the ground. Its body was smooth and black. Its voice came from nowhere. "Subject identified. Emotional bond confirmed." Termination initiated. Ethan stood in front of Liara, his arms wide. "No, you're not taking her." The drone paused, scanning him. "You are irrelevant. Move or be neutralized." Liai struggled to stand. She raised her hand. A small beam fired from her wrist, hit the drone, but only made it shift slightly. It charged its weapon again. Then Sayla arrived. She jumped between the drone and Liara, her voice loud and sharp, "You will not touch her." Drone turned to her. Secondary exile detected. Processing, but Sayla had already activated her tech. A wave of light burst from her body. It hit the drone's sensors. It paused, confused, long enough for Ethan to grab a metal pipe and strike the drone from behind. Hit didn't break it, but it caused a spark. The drone flew back into the air and vanished into the clouds. For now, Ethan held Liara in his arms. Sayla stood beside them, breathing hard. She looked at Ethan, her voice calm. "They'll send more." Ethan looked down at Liara, then up at Sayla. "Then we'll fight together." Liara opened her eyes. Her voice was soft. "You're not like the humans they warned us about." Ethan smiled. Maybe it's time they learned we're not all the same above them. The sky returned to silence, but for how long none of them knew. The forest no longer felt safe. The birds still sang. The wind still moved through the trees. But there was something in the air that didn't belong. Liara sat beside a cold stream. Her reflection rippled in the water. The color in her face was dim. The light in her eyes had faded since the drone attack. Ethan crouched beside her. He dipped a cloth into the water, wiped the blood from her forehead. His hands moved gently, like he was afraid she would break. She looked at him and whispered, "I should not have saved you." Ethan smiled softly. "But you did." Sayla stood nearby, scanning the sky with a small silver device. Her face was hard, her voice calm. "The drone didn't leave. It went to report." Ethan looked up at her. "So what happens now?" she answered without turning. "Now they send something worse." That evening, the clouds moved unnaturally fast. Animals began to run. Even insects vanished into holes. Something was coming. Liara felt it before the others did. A cold pressure on her chest, as if the air itself was pushing her down. Sayla stepped forward. Her device blinked red. She said one word: "Hunter over the hills." A second drone appeared, larger, stronger. Its black body glowed with red lights. And this time, it didn't hide. It flew low across the valley, scanning everything, burning away trees, marking territory. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. "We have to go." They ran toward the cave. But the drone moved faster. It fired a blast that hit the ground just behind them. The earth shook, rocks fell. Fire spread through the grass inside the cave. Sayla activated a small panel hidden in the wall. It opened a tunnel. "Go now," she said. They didn't ask questions. Ethan and Lyra ran into the tunnel. Sayla stayed behind. The drone entered the cave. Its lights scanned every corner. It found her secondary Exile identified. "Surrender for extraction." Sayla stepped forward. "You'll have to drag me back." The drone charged its weapon. But before it could fire, a loud sound broke through the cave walls. It was music, a voice, a melody. It came from outside, from the town, from the girl named Mara. She was singing again. Her song was soft, filled with sadness, but also strength. The drone paused. Sayla used that moment. She launched a pulse from her wrist. The cave collapsed, blocking the entrance in the tunnel. Ethan looked back as rocks crashed behind them. He shouted. Sayla. Liara held his hand tighter. "She find another way." They ran until the tunnel opened into an old barn. Dust covered the walls. Tools hung unused for years. Ethan had played here when he was a child. They rested for a moment. Breathing hard, he looked at Liara. "Are you all right?" She nodded, but her glow was still dim. She looked around the barn. Everything felt old and quiet, but also warm, safe. She asked, "Why do you trust me?" Ethan didn't speak right away. He picked up an old photograph from a shelf. It showed his parents smiling in front of the house. The house was gone now. "Burned down 2 years ago." He said, "I lost everything once. Now I have something again." Liara reached for the photo, touched the image gently. She could feel the pain in it. "The love, the loss you feel so much." She said, "How do you live with it?" Ethan looked at her. "Feeling isn't weakness. It's the reason I'm still here outside the barn." The sky flashed red. The drone had moved into town. People screamed. Cars crashed. Fires lit up the night. The military tried to fight back, but their weapons had no effect. The drone burned through tanks like paper. Mara stood in the street, holding her instrument. She played louder. Her voice carried across the town. Inside the drone, something started to shift. It slowed. Its lights flickered, as if the music was reaching places it didn't understand. Sayla emerged from the forest, her clothes torn, her body bruised, but her eyes locked on the drone. She walked into the street, stood beside Mara. The drone scanned them both, identified secondary Exile, human interference. Threat level high. Sayla stepped forward. She raised her hand, and for the first time she spoke. In the old language of Eltheria, words filled with power, memory, pain. The drone shivered. Its systems began to fail. Ethan and Liara arrived just as the drone started falling. It crashed into the street, sparking broken, but not destroyed. Liara ran to Sayla. They embraced, not as warriors but as sisters. Mara stood behind them, her voice soft. "That song was for you, I don't know why, but I had to sing it." Sayla nodded. "You saved us." The drone twitched, a red light blinked on its chest. Liara grabbed Ethan. "Get back." But Ethan didn't move. He looked at the drone, at the blinking light. He saw a small hole in the metal, just wide enough for a strike. He ran forward, picked up a broken pipe, and slammed it into the light. The drone sparked one last time, then went. Still silence returned. Ethan turned to Liara, breathing hard, but smiling. She ran to him, wrapped her arms around him, held him like she would never let go. Sayla looked up at the sky. She knew more would come, but now they weren't running. Now they were standing together, alien human, one bond, one fight, and the stars above were finally watching. The town slept under a sky that no longer felt safe. Fires had been put out, streets cleared, but the fear remained in the silence. People whispered about the attack. They talked about shadows, about machines that burned without warning, about a girl with glowing skin and a song that made a weapon. Stop. Ethan stayed close to Liara. He didn't want to leave her side. Not after what almost happened. They were in his uncle's old cabin now, hidden deep in the woods, a place no one had used for years. The roof leaked, the walls creaked, but to them it was home. Liara sat by the window, watching the stars. She didn't speak. Her hands rested on the windowsill. Her thoughts were somewhere far away. Ethan walked in with a blanket. He wrapped it around her shoulders, sat beside her. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice quiet. Back on Eltheria, there were no windows like this, no nights filled with stars. Just cold light and silence. He asked, "Do you miss it?" She shook her head. "I never belonged there." He turned to her. "Then maybe you were meant to belong here." Liara looked at him. Her eyes held something soft, something bright, but also broken. She whispered, "That's the problem." Sayla sat outside, her back against a tree, her legs stretched across the ground. She stared into the dark woods, listening for movement, watching for more drones, more threats. Mara sat near her, holding her instrument, fingers running over the strings, not playing, just thinking. Sayla said, "You should leave this place." Mara smiled. "Why would I do that?" "Because staying with us puts you in danger." Mara tilted her head. "I've lived in darkness all my life. I know danger when it speaks, but I also know truth when I hear it in someone's voice." Sayla turned her face away, but her eyes closed. Just for a second. Inside the cabin, Ethan pulled out his sketchbook. He showed Liara a drawing. It was of her, standing in the light, looking at the stars. She smiled. "You make me look strong." "You are." Her hand moved over the page. She stopped at a word written in the corner. "Hope." She looked at him. "You believe in that?" "I have to." She leaned closer. Their foreheads touched. He didn't move then. She kissed him, not as an alien, not as a fugitive, but as someone who had finally found a piece of herself. Stars outside shifted again, high above Earth. A council ship moved into position, dark and silent, hidden behind the moon inside. Altherian leaders studied the reports. They had confirmed the bond, confirmed emotional interference, confirmed contamination of human life. The punishment was clear. Execute the bond, extract the exiles, erase all memory of contact. One of the High Council members raised a hand. "But something has changed." They didn't just break the law. They created a connection no one expected. Another voice answered, "Connection is not permission. Emotion is not power. Order must be restored." A decision was made. A fleet would follow, not just drones this time, but judgment. Back on Earth, Liara and Ethan sat by a fire, their hands still locked together. She asked, "What if I told you we could run, leave this place, go somewhere far away?" Ethan looked into the flames. He said, "I'd follow you anywhere, but I won't hide from who we are." She nodded, her heart full but heavy. Sayla walked in. Her face was pale. She held a device in her hand. The screen showed a signal coming from above. "They found us again," she said. Liara stood, her glow returning. Ethan asked, "What do we do?" Sayla looked at them, her voice calm. "We show them what this bond really means." That night, Liara activated a transmitter hidden in her ship. It sent a message across the stars. It carried one word: love. Signal was caught by the council ship. It was decoded and confused them. Didn't understand why these humans mattered, why this forbiddance. Bond had not collapsed under fear, but they were not ready to listen. Not yet on Earth. Mara played her song again. Not for war, not for peace, but for memory. She sat beside Sayla. Their hands touched just for a moment inside the cabin. Ethan held Liara close. They didn't speak. They didn't need to in the dark, in the silence. They had become something more, not human, not alien, but something in between, the bond that should never have existed. Now held the power to change everything, and far above them. The stars began to move, not away, but toward. The fleet was coming. The final test was near, and this time Earth would not face it alone. The night sky above Earth was no longer empty. It shimmered with movement, tiny flashes of light, faint trails across the stars. Eltherian fleet had arrived, hidden behind the moon, waiting for orders, watching. Inside the lead ship, High Council voices echoed across silver halls. They studied Earth, measured its heat, its noise, its chaos. They saw the bond between Liara and Ethan, and they feared it. Emotion was weakness to them. Connection was a virus, and now that virus had spread, Council command declared a final action, full memory reset, exile removal, and a message to Earth: you are not ready, you are not worthy. Back on the ground, Liara stood in the woods near the cabin. She looked up at the sky, eyes wide, heart steady. She felt them, the ships above, the cold minds watching. Ethan stepped beside her. His hand found hers. He whispered, "They're here, aren't they?" She nodded. "And they won't come to talk inside the cabin." Sayla adjusted the alien tech panel she had rebuilt. It hummed with energy. Its surface pulsed with color. Mara watched from the doorway. She could hear the vibration. Even though she could not see it, she asked, "What is that?" Sayla replied, "A transmitter. If we send the right signal, it might reach others." Mara stepped closer. "Others like Yao?" Sayla shook her head. "Others like them, but different. Those who left the Council long ago. Those who still believe in feeling." Mara placed a hand on Sayla's arm. Her voice was gentle. "Then let's give them something worth hearing." In town, people saw strange lights in the sky. Some called the news, some grabbed weapons, some simply prayed. But no one knew that the fate of two worlds now rested in the hands of two alien sisters, a blind girl and a human boy. Liara turned to Ethan. She said, "We need to speak to all of Earth, but not with machines, not with weapons." Ethan looked confused. Then how she smiled. "With truth." They returned to the old barn, the place where their bond began. Ethan set up his father's old radio transmitter. It barely worked, but it carried voices, and that was a noose. Elu linked it to the alien signal core. The result was simple, powerful, raw. Yara stepped forward and began to speak. Her voice was calm, clear. She told Earth who she was, where she came from, what her people believed, and what she no longer believed. She said, "Love is not weakness, it is strength." She spoke of Ethan, of saving him, of feeling something no training could erase. She ended with a promise: "We did not come to conquer, we came to survive, and in doing so we found something greater than any command." Her words were heard in cities, towns, military bases, and far above. In every Eltherian ship watching from orbit. The Council was silent for a moment. Then they responded. A bright beam shot down from the sky, not to destroy, but to deliver a warning. It carved symbols into the desert floor, symbols of judgment, of finality. Ethan ran to the top of a hill, looked at the glowing marks. He shouted into the wind, "We won't be silent." Sayla activated the last part of the transmitter. The energy core pulsed. It reached deep into space and far beyond the Council fleet. Something answered, a new signal. Faint, but real. Yara turned to Sayla. "Who is it?" Sayla looked at the stars and said, "The forgotten." Moments later, the sky split again, but not with fire, with light. Dozens of small ships appeared. Old designs, scarred from past wars, but powerful. They flew in perfect silence and hovered between Earth and the Council fleet. One of them opened a signal. A voice spoke. "We heard your message. We left the Council long ago because we chose to feel. We stand with the bond." The Council shouted back, "This is betrayal." But the voice responded, "This is evolution." Back on Earth, Liara and Ethan embraced. They didn't speak. They didn't Need to the people of Earth, stepped outside, watched the sky, saw the light grow. And for the first time they weren't afraid of it. Mara played her song again, not just for Sayla but for everyone. It reached the ships, the forests, the hearts of those who thought they had none. The council gave one final command: leave Earth. Let the bond die on its own. The fleet turned slowly, disappeared behind the stars. The light faded. The silence returned. But nothing was the same. Ethan stood on the hill, Liara beside him. He said, we didn't win a war. We just showed them what love looks like. She smiled, and sometimes that's all it takes. Behind them, Sayla held Mara's hand. Not tightly, just enough to say, I'm here. The world kept turning, but now it turned with eyes open. Aliens had come, not as invaders, not as gods, but as hearts in search of meaning, and Earth had given them more than refuge. It had given them love. The stars above Earth had never been so quiet. No ships moved, no weapons glowed, no warnings lit the sky. But the silence did not mean peace. It meant something bigger was coming. The council had left, but they hadn't accepted defeat. They had paused. And in that pause, they began a final test. A council judge, not a machine, not a drone, but one of the oldest Eltherians, would come to Earth. They called her Virea. She had lived for 4,000 years. Never smiled, never questioned the law, never failed to carry out judgment, and now she would decide the fate of Liara, Sayla, and Earth itself. No one could stop her. No ship, no weapon, no plea. She would listen. Then she would choose one final judgment. In the cabin, Liara sat with Ethan. She held his hand, but her eyes were distant. She said, the council is sending her. He knew what she meant. He had heard the stories from Liara, from Sayla, from the whispers in space. He asked, what can we do? She looked at him, her voice low. We stand, and we speak. Sayla stood outside. She had cleaned the landing field, a wide open space between the trees, where the ship would arrive. Mara sat on the porch, tuning her instrument, preparing a song, not for defense, but for truth. The sun rose slow and red, and with it, a single silver ship came down from the sky. It landed without sound, without flame, like a feather touching the ground. From it stepped Vireash, looked human, but too perfect. Skin like crystal, eyes like frozen time, a cloak of silver threads that moved without wind. She said nothing. She walked forward, and the air seemed to move aside for her. Liara and Sayla stood together, Ethan and Mara behind them. Virea stopped in front of them, her voice calm but heavy. The bond between exile and human has been confirmed. The council has given me full authority to end it, or let it live. She looked at Liara. You may speak. Liara stepped forward, her voice strong, but her hands shook. I broke the law, but I didn't break the truth. We were told to hide, to stay silent. But when I saw what humans felt, what they survived, what they carried, I saw something I had never known. She turned to Ethan. And I felt something no training could stop. Virea asked, is this love? Liara nodded. And do you believe love should be allowed to rewrite our code? Liara replied, not rewrite, but remind. Virea turned to Sayla. And you, do you stand with this? Ella stepped forward. Her voice was colder, but filled with fire. I followed orders all my life, until the orders told me to forget what it meant to care. I won't follow that again. Virea looked at Mara. And you are not of our world. Mara smiled. I am blind, but I have seen more in them than I ever saw in anyone else. Virea was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to Ethan. She looked into his eyes. You are human, limited, emotional, imperfect. He nodded. Yes, all of that. And you love this exile. Without pause, he said, with everything I am. She looked at him longer, then stepped back. She said, on my world, love is not considered strength, but what I see here, what I feel, is not weakness. It is something we have forgotten. She raised her hand. A soft light glowed in her palm. This is the core of judgment. Once activated, it rewrites the status of the exiles, their lives, their freedom, their bondi will. Leave the final command to her. She placed the glowing core in Lyra's hands. Lyra looked at it, then looked at Ethan. The world held its breath. She closed her fingers around it. The core pulsed once, then vanished into lighting. That moment, the exile was erased, not as punishment, but as forgiveness. Veri turned and walked back to her ship before entering. she said. "We were wrong, but perhaps now we can begin again." The ship rose and disappeared into the sky. The forest was quiet again. Liara turned to Ethan, her eyes wet, but her heart steady. "I'm not running anymore." He smiled. "Neither am I." Zayla stood beside Mara. Her hand brushed against hers. Mara whispered, "So what now?" Zayla looked at the stars. "Now we live." People in town began to return, not in fear, but in wonder. They had seen the ships, heard the voices, felt the change, and deep inside, they knew Earth had just taken a step into something greater, not because of power, not because of war, but because two hearts refused to stay apart. Weeks later, Ethan opened a small art gallery in town. Every wall was covered in paintings of light, of stars, of her. Liara stood beside him, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. Children pointed, smiled, asked questions, and she answered them with truth. Mara played music at the opening, and Sayla stood nearby watching, listening, not as a soldier, but as someone who had finally found peace above them. The stars watched, and for once they did not judge, they simply witnessed.